You wake up at 3 a.m. again, not because something went wrong, but because your brain stays active when it should shut down. And you've probably noticed this already. Your heart isn't racing, but your mind is wide awake, as if something inside refuses to turn off. Your room is quiet, but your brain isn't. Your body feels tired, but your thoughts won't slow down. It feels like an invisible switch is stuck, keeping you alert when you need rest the most, and it keeps happening night after night. And here's the strange part. This same something explains why you can't fall asleep some nights, why your mind starts racing the moment you lie down, and why you can't sleep through the night even when exhausted. This isn't ordinary insomnia or a lack of discipline. There is a very specific biological reason behind it. And to understand it, you need the first missing piece of the puzzle. I'm Dr. Sarah, a sleep medicine specialist with a background in psychiatry, and over the last several years, I've worked with thousands of patients struggling to understand their own nights. Many of them came to me after trying everything without results, especially people who began experiencing insomnia after turning 40. And despite their different backgrounds, a hidden pattern kept appearing. I noticed a specific behavior in the brain that most people never hear about, a reaction that quietly determines whether you stay asleep or wake up at 3 a.m. It affects how your mind behaves the moment you lie down. It controls whether your thoughts slow down or start racing, and it influences your ability to fall back asleep once awake. This pattern was too consistent to ignore, and it led me to something deeper. Most sleep advice focuses on habits, routines, or lifestyle changes. Those can help, but they often fail to explain recurring night awakenings. They don't explain why some people sleep lightly no matter what they do. They don't explain why the brain stays alert when the body feels exhausted. They don't explain why sleep fragmentation becomes so predictable, especially between 3 a.m. and 4 a.m. So I dug further into the science. That's when sleep research began revealing something unexpected, a specific nighttime reaction inside the brain, triggered not by fear, stress, or willpower, but how the nervous system interprets the night itself, a reaction that strengthens with age, becoming more noticeable after 40 and more disruptive than most people realize. And the more cases I studied, the clearer this biological pattern became. It wasn't random, it wasn't psychological weakness, and it wasn't something people could simply push through. It was a built-in response with a clear purpose, but one major consequence: broken nights. And all of this connects to a single reaction that sleep science only recently began to understand. A reaction that explains the 3 a.m. awakening, the racing mind, the inability to fall back asleep once awake, and the feeling of being tired no matter how long you stay in bed. And this is where everything starts to make sense. Sleep science has identified a specific brain state that quietly blocks deep, restorative sleep, especially between 3 a.m. and 4 a.m. It doesn't feel dramatic from the outside. It often looks like a simple awakening, but inside the brain, something very different is happening, something most people never learn about. This state has a name, a precise and memorable one: Neural Sleep Inhibition Response. It may sound complex at first, but the logic behind it is surprisingly simple. In fact, it's almost too simple to believe, and that's what makes it so strange. Because when you hear the explanation, you realize it contradicts everything you were told about sleep. It isn't about stress alone. It isn't about willpower or discipline. It isn't about having the right routine. It's about how the brain interprets nighttime signals, signals that determine whether it releases deep sleep or blocks it. And here's what's even more surprising. This mechanism explains far more than a 3 a.m. awakening. It explains why your mind won't shut off when you lie down, why your thoughts accelerate instead of slowing down, why falling back asleep feels impossible once you're awake, why you can't sleep through the night no matter what you try, and why the exhaustion never fully goes away. The pattern is consistent because the mechanism is consistent. Every symptom points in the same direction, every night follows the same hidden script, and every disruption leads back to the same reaction. The neural sleep inhibition response isn't random. It's activated for a reason, and it follows its own internal logic. But before I explain how this mechanism actually works, you need to understand something even more important: why the brain decides to activate it in the first place, why it senses a need to block deep sleep, why it keeps you alert even when you're exhausted, and why this decision happens without your awareness. Because once you understand the trigger, everything changes. What most people never realize is that the brain has its own nighttime surveillance mode. It's subtle, quiet, and often mistaken for simple restlessness. But it's far more specific than that, and far more disruptive. We call this state the brain alert mode. It's not fear, and it's not conscious anxiety. It's the nervous system staying on guard, monitoring the environment, as if the night isn't fully safe yet, even when everything around you is calm. When this mode activates, the sleep switch doesn't fully engage. Your body tries to settle, but the brain refuses to release control, so sleep becomes light, fragmented, unstable, and the slightest internal signal can push you back into wakefulness. That's why the 3 a.m. awakening feels so immediate. It's not random. It's not hormonal chaos. It's the brain exiting shallow sleep at the exact moment its alert mode peaks. And once the mind is awake, falling back asleep becomes almost impossible. Night after night, this vigilance creates a predictable pattern: light sleep, early awakenings, racing thoughts. The more it happens, the more sensitive the system becomes, and the cycle strengthens without you ever noticing the shift. And this cycle will keep repeating until you understand what drives this alert mode, what tells the brain to hold back deep sleep, what keeps it scanning the environment even when your body's exhausted, and what hidden signal triggers this response in the first place, because that trigger is the key to everything. Most people believe they can't sleep. They assume the problem is falling asleep itself, but that's not what's actually happening, because in reality, their body does fall asleep. It's the stability of that sleep that collapses, and that changes everything. Sleep doesn't fail at the beginning. It fails in the middle. It fails when the brain tries to deepen the cycle. It fails when the system attempts to release full restoration, and every time it reaches that threshold, something interrupts the process, something internal, not external. Because the moment the nervous system moves toward deep sleep, the neural sleep inhibition response steps in. It disrupts the transition, forcing the brain to hover in shallow stages, and that is what creates the illusion of light sleep, the illusion of being half awake all night, the illusion that your brain refuses to shut off. This is why your mind suddenly speeds up at night, why thoughts feel louder in the dark, why micro-awakenings repeat without warning, why you open your eyes exhausted even after hours in bed, why the body sleeps but never restores, why falling back asleep feels like climbing uphill. It all follows the same internal pattern. The symptoms are different, but the mechanism behind them is the same. Racing mind at night, brain won't shut off, light sleep that breaks at the slightest signal, difficulty falling back asleep, morning fatigue that feels unexplainable. And the reason this mechanism becomes so sensitive has nothing to do with weakness, discipline, or mindset. There is a very specific trigger that amplifies the neural sleep inhibition response and makes the brain enter this pattern night after night. And once you understand that trigger, the entire picture finally becomes clear. After 40, the body changes in ways most people never expect. Not dramatic changes, not signs of decline, but subtle shifts in how the brain and hormones communicate. Shifts that influence how the night feels, how easily the mind relaxes, and how stable sleep becomes. One of the biggest changes is cortisol sensitivity. The same amount of cortisol now has a stronger impact on the brain. This means nighttime alertness can activate more easily. Small signals feel louder to the nervous system. Minor disruptions become full awakenings, and the brain enters protection mode faster than before, especially between 3 a.m. and 4 a.m. At the same time, the circadian rhythm becomes less rigid. Its timing drifts more easily. Its cues weaken if not reinforced. And when circadian stability decreases, the sleep switch becomes more fragile. Deep sleep becomes harder to maintain. This combination makes the brain respond quicker to the brain alert mode, not because something is wrong, not because you're stressed all the time, but because your system is now more reactive by design. It's a natural part of aging physiology, not a personal failure. And this explains why so many people after 40 start struggling with insomnia without warning, why they wake up at 3 a.m. with no clear trigger, why they can't stay asleep all night even when exhausted, why sleep feels lighter than it used to, why restoration doesn't last. It's all part of the same hidden shift. But here's the part almost no one tells you. This sensitivity is not permanent. It can be recalibrated with the right nighttime signals. It can be reversed by addressing the specific mechanism behind it. And the process starts in the most overlooked place, inside every night of fragmented sleep, the very point where the brain decides whether to deepen or block sleep. When the neural sleep inhibition response activates, it's not a malfunction of your mind, it's a deeply wired protective mechanism. Your brain is scanning for subtle signs of danger, and when it feels even slightly uncertain, it blocks access to deep sleep automatically, even if you feel exhausted and desperate to rest. This is why your mind suddenly feels too alert at night, why thoughts speed up the moment you lie down, and why falling asleep feels harder than it should. Your brain is acting as a night guard on high alert, convinced you need to stay partially awake, keeping you in a shallow, fragile sleep state, never letting your system fully switch off. It's the same mechanism behind micro-awakenings, that light sleep that never restores energy, and the sensation that your brain won't shut down, even though your body feels completely drained, because the system is still scanning for threats, monitoring instead of allowing deep recovery, trying to protect instead of allowing restoration. And here's the part most people never realize. The brain doesn't deactivate this mode on its own. It needs very specific physiological signals that tell the system it is finally safe enough to release the guard at the door, safe enough to allow full neurological descent, safe enough to let deep sleep take over. Without these signals, the brain keeps blocking sleep, not because it wants to sabotage your nights, but because it believes you still need protection, believes something isn't stable or secure enough, believes staying alert is the safer choice, and so it interrupts the sleep deepening process, night after night, without you knowing why. Once the brain finally receives the right signals, the entire sleep architecture begins to shift. The hyper-alert mode gradually powers down, deep sleep becomes accessible again, and the system stops misinterpreting safety cues, allowing the body to rest the way it was designed, which leads directly into the next crucial question. Once the brain finally receives the right signals, the entire sleep architecture begins to shift. The hyper-alert mode gradually powers down, deep sleep becomes accessible again, and the system stops misinterpreting safety cues, allowing the body to rest the way it was designed, which leads directly into the next crucial question. What signals does the brain need?
For the brain to keep you asleep all night long, it depends on a precise internal communication system, a system that only works when the right signals are active, guiding the body into a stable, continuous sleep cycle, creating the conditions for deep rest to take over fully, preventing unnecessary awakenings during the night, and sustaining the sleep switch until the morning. The first requirement is stable nighttime cortisol because fluctuations trigger alertness instantly, sending false danger signals to the nervous system, breaking the natural rhythm that holds sleep together, forcing the brain into a protective wake-up mode and interrupting the transition into deep stages, right at the moment you need rest the most. The second requirement is a nervous system at rest, a state where the body is no longer scanning threats, where muscles loosen and breathing slows naturally, and the system exits the heightened alert responses, allowing brain waves to settle into restorative patterns, removing internal tension that disturbs sleep cycles and unlocking the pathways that sustain deep sleep.
The third requirement is circadian coherence, the alignment of your internal 24-hour clock, the timing that dictates when you feel sleepy, how easily you stay asleep during the night, and whether your brain stays synchronized or not, because misalignment weakens sleep stability and makes awakenings at the same hour predictable. When any of these three conditions falter, the sleep switch simply cannot stay engaged, and the brain continues waking you at set times, as if an internal alarm were built into your biology, activating in the exact same window every night, despite your body wanting more rest deeply and leaving you wondering what is really happening. But there is a way to send the right signals again, signals that naturally recalibrate this system, lowering nighttime alertness without forcing sedation, guiding the nervous system back into safety mode, restoring circadian stability step by step, and sustaining the sleep switch throughout the night, leading to the key question you're about to discover: what are these signals and how do you send them? This is where the protocol I developed becomes essential, not by forcing your body into artificial sedation, not by overwhelming the brain with chemical suppression, and not by using strategies that push sleep unnaturally, but by working with the biology that already exists, restoring the patterns your nervous system expects, and supporting the signals that keep sleep intact. The entire idea behind the protocol is simple, because instead of trying to overpower the brain, it helps guide the system back into balance naturally, reducing the defensive nighttime reactions inside it, allowing internal rhythms to resync steadily again, removing the tension that interrupts deep sleep cycles, and reestablishing the conditions the brain relies on. It starts by decreasing the neural sleep inhibition response, the same mechanism that keeps your mind too active, the one that blocks the transition into deep rest and triggers awakenings at nearly the same time nightly, all because the brain thinks it is protecting you, even when the environment is completely safe and the body desperately needs restorative sleep. At the same time, it calms the brain alert mode, helping the nervous system switch out of vigilance, releasing the internal pressure that keeps you awake, allowing the mind to loosen its grip on nighttime tension, resetting the cycle that leads to fragmented sleep, stabilizing the pathways that keep rest continuous, and preparing the body for uninterrupted recovery. Then it supports nighttime cortisol stability, so those silent hormonal spikes lose their power, preventing sudden alertness from taking over, keeping your system steady during the deepest hours, while the sleep switch stays engaged consistently, and your brain stops reacting as if danger exists. When these pieces work together each night, they create the ideal environment for real rest, making it easier to stay asleep naturally again and allowing you to wake with true restoration, supported by a method that aligns with sleep biology, developed to assist the body without forcing anything, leading to other improvements you may soon notice. What else begins to improve when sleep stabilizes?
In the next video, I'm going to reveal something crucial, the reason your brain enters the brain alert mode, specifically between 3 a.m. and 3:30 a.m. every night, as if that exact window were programmed internally, triggering a surge of nighttime vigilance automatically, even when your body is exhausted and wants to sleep, and interrupting the rest you try so hard to maintain. Most people never learn why this window exists, yet it's one of the most predictable sleep disruptions, and it's not random, psychological, or behavioral, but tied to the way the brain monitors safety at night, activating protective mechanisms without your awareness, pushing you awake even when you don't feel anxious, and breaking the deep stages your body needs. This phenomenon is directly linked to the mechanism behind the neural sleep inhibition response itself, the same system that keeps your mind from shutting down, that blocks your descent into deep, continuous rest, and that wakes you at nearly the same time every night, all because of a misunderstood neurological trigger, one that most people never hear about. If you found yourself waking at 3 a.m. repeatedly, feeling mentally alert but physically exhausted, unable to settle your thoughts back into calmness, or struggling to re-enter a deeper sleep stage, the explanation you've been missing is coming next, and it will help you understand your nights differently in a way that finally makes sense with your experience. So if you want to understand the hidden trigger, the one that silently activates inside your brain, preventing the sleep switch from staying engaged, pushing your system into nighttime vigilance mode, and creating the repetitive 3 a.m. awakening cycle, you'll want to watch what comes right after this, because the next video breaks it all down clearly. Stay with me for this upcoming explanation, because once you see what happens in that window, you'll finally understand why your nights unfold this way, why your brain reacts even without conscious stress, and why sleep feels so fragile in those early hours, all leading to a deeper understanding of your own biology and preparing you for what we explore next. Next video continues the unraveling.